So today for our notes, we're going to start off with unit number 3, which is about China. So in your notes, go ahead and write down unit 3, China. And after you've written down unit 3, China, below that, go ahead and write down Huang River Valley and underline. So write down unit 3, China, and then Huang River Valley, and then underline Huang River Valley. So for the Huang River Valley, it's the main river valley for China. It's where civilization develops at in China. There's a couple major river valley civilizations. I'll kind of show you here on the map. The first one that you guys are kind of most familiar with is the Nile for Egypt. So the Egyptians developed on the Nile, which is right here. So that's kind of the one you guys are most familiar with. There are 4 altogether, but that's the one I said you're most familiar with. The next one is 2 rivers that are right next to each other. It's the Tigris and Euphrates over in the Middle East. This is kind of called Mesopotamia. So that's in that area. Then there's one in India called the Indus. And then the one we're talking about is the Huang He, sometimes called the Yellow River, but we're going to call it the Huang He because that's what it's called now. And that's right here in the north part of China. So those are the 4 major river civilizations. Basically, when we say river civilizations, those are the first civilizations to get started in the world. So where do civilizations start at? Well, they started in these 4 areas first. That's where civilizations start at. And a civilization is a place where people get together. They start developing cities. They start developing technology. There's an actual system of government. So when we're talking about civilization, we're talking about those type of things. Cities, government, an actual system for running a society. This picture right here just shows how China looked at in kind of the original days. So this is kind of showing what it looked like kind of back in the Huang River Valley days. So about 4,000 years ago and such. You can see for their structures and such what they're doing. They were taking sticks. They would put them into a pyramid shape. So instead of doing more of a circular shape or a triangular shape, they kind of go with the 4 corners and then make the pyramid shape there. So they go with the pyramid shape there. So very similar to what you might expect from the teepee in a way. And the way how it's similar to a teepee is you notice that there's a hole at the very top of the pyramid there. So it's a very hole on the very top. That way, when they have smoke going, smoke can go for that hole. Okay. So there is a hole right at the top there so smoke can get out. And what's on the outside of these buildings, that's mud brick. Mud brick is pretty simple to make. You just need water, dirt, and then you need something to bind it together. Straw, hay is usually what you kind of use. So you take water, you add it to the ground, you just kind of put it in the ground. You take some straw, add it in there, you stir it up, and then you can put it on the side here. So you put it kind of on these parts here. So you put it on the side, wait for it to dry, and there you go, mud brick. You can also make them into bricks and then leave them out in the sun and wait for them to solidify. And then you can also start stacking them up as well. Make a bullet and go ahead and write down prehistory. So bullet prehistory. So I'm saying prehistory, I'm just kind of talking about the time before China really got going into a civilization, kind of the very beginnings of it. So the very first inhabitants of of China goes back about 1.3 million years ago. So a long time ago, people got over to China and they were hunters and gatherers. Hunting and gathering, what that means is just you have people going out. Generally speaking, the men would go out and hunt, then the women would gather. So women would gather any type of plants they could find in the area. Berries, for example, would work out pretty well. Vegetables, anything they could find. So really any type of food they could find, just going out and gathering, the women would kind of find. And then men would go out and hunt animals, whatever animals they could find. Pigs are indigenous to China, so that's one thing they could find in the area. Eventually, they did start farming, but that wasn't until about 7,000 before Common Era. So about 7,000 years before year 0. All right, that's when farming started developing in the area. Go ahead and make a 1 and write down farming started at about 7,000 before Common Era. based on rice and millet. So based on rice and millet. If you don't know what rice looks like, that's the picture on the bottom here. That's rice. Okay, so that's what rice looks like. The picture on the top is millet. A lot of times you get asked about what is millet. So millet's the one there on the top. That's millet. Millet is very similar to wheat. So millet's very similar to wheat. So you can make cereal out of it. You know, as a cereal crop, it can be stored for long periods of time. Rice is also called a cereal crop. So it's kind of called the same thing. Rice, again, though, you can make it can store for long periods of time. So most rice and millet can be stored for long periods of time. Why is that important? Because things don't grow in the winter. That's why it's important. So if you have a large population, you have to be able to supply that large population with food. When it gets to wintertime, since things don't grow in the wintertime, like how are you going to get food then for a large population? Things that can be stored and they can be eaten during the wintertime. So rice and millet. Both can be stored during wintertime. That's kind of what you're looking for. Okay, so that was number one. Next thing here is just kind of talking about China and kind of how it's isolated. So China is pretty isolated from the other four river valley civilizations. Okay, so our three, sorry. So there are three river valley civilizations. So China kind of develops independently, and they don't really have much interaction with these guys. Not until they start developing trade links with them. But those trade links don't come around until much later. They don't really get going until we get close to the year zero. That's when China starts getting trade links out with them. But before that, they're pretty isolated from everybody else. What's the reason for that? Well, there's a couple reasons for it. Go ahead and make a number two. And this one I don't have written on the screen. But number two is just going to be ocean to the east. So number two is ocean to the east. There, I'll write it right here for you so you can see it. Ocean to the east. So the first thing kind of blocking China in and keeping them kind of in their area is that there's an ocean out here to the east. And back when you're in 5,000 before Common Era and so forth, it's not like you can really go anywhere around the ocean. You know, you can maybe stay close to the coastline with the type of boats that they had, but you're not traveling from China over to Japan. That's not happening in the year, in 7,000 before Common Era or 5,000 before Common Era. Remember, the Japanese don't really get over there until the 1,000-ish before Common Era, or kind of close to year zero before Common Era. That's kind of when they're coming over. So, it takes a while to develop that technology. So in the very early days, they just didn't have the tech to be able to go to distant places. Just kind of wasn't happening and such. You could travel far distance, kind of like Hawaiians, for example, or the people that live out in the Polynesian Islands. You could go a long distance and so forth, but it was super difficult and required the particular type of ships, which the Chinese at this point in time just don't have. All right. What's the next thing? Well, the next thing is down to the south. So down in this area right here, you have a bunch of mountains. You have the Himalayan mountains. So that's the next thing that kind of blocks them in. So we're going to make it 3. And we're going to write down mountains to the south. So the thing blocking them in on the south side is these mountains. So the thing blocking them in on the south side is you have these mountains right here. You have the Himalayan mountains that are blocking them in on the south side. So you got this ocean here that's kind of blocking you, keeping you from going from really far distances. You have the mountains over here blocking you that you can't really cross over. So there was down here in the southeast, they could go down this way into Vietnam. That's pretty rainforesty, but they could go down this area and go see Vietnam and such. So they could come around like this and go visit our people, but that's a long distance. And then the last things kind of blocking them in is there's 2 deserts. You see Taklamakan Desert over here and the Gobi Desert. And those blocked up the north and the west. So we're going to make a 4. And we're going to write down deserts to north, the north, and west. So we're going to make a 4. We're going to write down deserts to the north and west. So both the Taklamakan Desert and the Gobi Desert both blocked in China to both the west and north. So with these natural barriers, China develops independently of everybody else. It's why we see technology in China is going to be different compared to everybody else. China is actually pretty good at technology. They get further ahead than everybody else in terms of tech. So in terms of technology, they're the ones that really come up with a lot of the first technologies where they're pretty inventive and come up with things that other people don't come up with. A lot of people end up kind of copying the things that the Chinese invent without really realizing that they had gotten the original idea from the Chinese. This happens when we're thinking about gunpowder, for example. Like the Chinese had developed fireworks and they developed gunpowder, and they developed some basic gunpowdery weapons. They never developed them really beyond the basics. But then that gunpowder technology eventually makes its way over to Europe. They pick it up, and then they start developing that further into guns and cannons. Same thing can also happen with silk as well. Chinese had silk. They're ones that came up with it. They were the only ones that were making silk. Silk, if you don't know, it's you get it from a cocoon of a silkworm, and then you take that cocoon, you put it in the hot water, you unravel it, and then it's a thread, and then you can make clothing out of it. So that clothing technology, the silk, the Chinese only had access to it for a long time because they kept it secret how they were doing it. And then eventually other people in the world start picking it up later on, like how to make silk and how to do that. But at first, it's very much just a Chinese thing. So the Chinese, they kind of develop things first, and then eventually other people start picking them up, what they were doing later on. All right. Let's go ahead and stop there for today.